All right, so let's bring in our first set of panelists to help us navigate some of these issues that we need to talk about, especially looking at Nigeria's journey through democracy and the one-year performance of the Tinubu administration in implementing its renewed hope agenda since May 29, 2023. 1 year on, how far so far? Joining us on the program this morning is Emmanuel Osemeka, who is a public affairs commentator. Murkthar Suleiman is also another public affairs commentator, and these gentlemen will help us navigate some of the issues. Hopefully they will give us the glass half full and glass half empty version of it so that we don't dampen everybody's mood this morning. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you both. Right, so where do we start from? 1 year so far. How well has the Tinubu administration done in at least renewing this hope that Nigerians badly need? Let me start with you, Mr. Emmanuel.
Oh, you started with me?
Yeah.
Okay, good morning.
There was a conversation by you. Around who seemed to be enjoying this administration, but I'm sure it's time to find out.
I thought you were going to start with Murkthar because, I mean, Murkthar his hope has been renewed. But mine, I'm yet to see the ray. I mean, we were here a year ago, or thereabout, and the reality is that I think the government is here to take off. In my view, I think the government is here to take off because, using the former President Olusegun Obasanjo's words, there's still a lot of trial by error. There's still a lot of, in my view, learning curves that the administration is still battling with. It clearly shows lack of preparedness, by the administration. I suppose that a lot of Nigerians thought that for someone like President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who was governor of Lagos State some 20-something years ago, and who's been in politics, active politics, all through this period, that he should be much more prepared. It is expected, in my view, that he ought to have had a team, prepare for his first day in office, first 1 week, first 1 month, first 100 days, like the tradition. Howbeit, if he decided that, okay, he wasn't going to follow through with a lot of the traditions, which we've seen, in the last 1 year, the same team could have also been able to bring up some strategic, plans with clear-cut deliverables, measurable deliverables that you will say, oh, yes, now we have a president. So I would say that why I went in this direction is to the extent that one, the very first Greek yogurt I would use the president gave us was subsidy is gone. In my view, that was not true. That was not an honest statement on May 29, 2023, because the administration that was handing over to him prepared for subsidy till 30th of June. And I want to believe that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari did it in such a way that he would have at least 1 month.
Like a buffer.
Yes, to prepare, plan, make all the necessary adjustments. Then when finally the subsidy, goes off, traditionally, or legally, we wouldn't have the kind of ripple effect that we are facing, 1 year down the line. So the removal of the way he removed the subsidy, because the subsidy was meant to be removed by 30th of June, 2023. But President Bola Tinubu removed the subsidy on the 29th of May. Now, when they come out to speak, when his handlers come out to speak, they say, oh no, subsidy was already removed. That's not correct. Subsidy was meant to go out legally because the law prepared, the budget prepared, and made plans for subsidy till 30th. So he removed it a month before. And unfortunately for him, there were no plans. And that is one of the biggest errors that the administration made. And followed immediately with the harmonization of the exchange rate, still without any strategic plan. So these two major, policy, I wouldn't call it flip-flop, policy error or policy implementation errors, bedeviled whatever they put on top in the last 12 months. So it's been a struggle because, don't forget, petroleum products, diesel, PMS, touches every aspect of our national life, be it agriculture, market, transportation, what have you, rental, you can't touch any part of Nigerian life without.
Yeah, but there's also the issue, Murkthar, that President Tinubu is only making lemonade out of the lemons that life has thrown at him. And this was bound to happen. I mean, he inherited a mess, if we're going to be honest, isn't it?
If we all keep saying that, if we all keep blaming previous administrations, we will not move forward. And I think one of the biggest problems that we have with our politicians is that they fail to understand consumer behavior. We keep rolling out policies without understanding the behaviors of the people you are rolling out the policies for. Nigerians, naturally, when we see a system, the first thing we are thinking of is how to beat the system, not how to improve the system. So if you want to roll out policies for such kind of people, you can't roll out policies like you're rolling out policies for Europeans. Their own consumer behavior is completely and utterly different. When you remove fuel subsidy, the immediate effect, even if it had no effect immediately, the first thing everybody does is that they will inflate prices because everybody wants to find a way to make money from it. The moment fuel subsidy was removed, there was fuel queue. Why? People started hoarding their fuel immediately. That's consumer behavior. And then we started panic buying. That's our consumer behavior. So we need to learn how these things operate. You can't be giving out policies to people when you don't understand how they behave around this. When you fully understand, the first thing you want to do is understand how would the Nigerians react to this particular policy. A few weeks ago, I saw Oyedele on the television saying that they want to increase VAT and that they are discussing with the organized private sector to say that prices will not go up. I said, what's Oyedele? Oyedele should have just stayed at PwC. Because what's he telling me like this? Like you're speaking as if you don't know Nigerians. The moment you increase VAT, I go to buy food in a restaurant, I'm asked to pay VAT. I'm paying my house rent, I'm paying VAT. I'm paying the lawyer and I'm paying VAT on top of the lawyer's money. So when you come and you tell me that these things do not, they do. Because we need to understand, they say a politically illiterate society cannot in any way sustain a democracy. And that is one of the biggest problems we're having. Most people do not understand market dynamics. The people who are leading these policies do not understand how to communicate market dynamics properly. We have no control of the markets to start with. There's no organized private sector, as far as I'm concerned. There's no organized market system in this country. So when you're rolling out policies, everybody is doing everything haphazardly.
A dysfunctional one or non-existent?
Well, okay, fine. Since you've given me a good synonym, a dysfunctional market system. Let's call it that. Let's call it that.
Murkthar, just to follow up with your response, this is a government that took over from what would appear another government from the same party. One would have thought that if we operated a system, that a homogeneous system, he would have basically been taking over the programs of the previous party. Now, give me a sense of what has happened. Is it a complete lack of trust on what the predecessor has done? Did we get to a point where we needed to abandon everything the predecessor was doing? Because clearly, as we have come to understand, with the benefit of hindsight, we were going nowhere. We were practically pretending by keeping the subsidy. There was no way this country would have sustained a 6 trillion naira annual subsidy. That was clear. Maybe what we cannot agree on is how that removal should have happened. The exchange rate market was just creating arbitrage for people. We knew we couldn't have
accessed that original
or continue to keep that system in place. So what exactly went wrong? Is it in the wholesale deployment of these reforms, or we would have done something different?
It still comes back down to understanding the consumer behavior of the people that you are rolling out policies for. There's a popular saying that says it is good politics and good policies that brings good governance. So even if you come up with good policies, very staunch policies, if you fail in the politics, because the politics is where the human angle comes in, it's how you discuss with the human beings that are going to be involved in these policies. If you fail in that politics, good governance will not be achieved. If you get the politics right, and you fail in the policies, good governance will still not be achieved. And we can see that play out in places like maybe Kaduna, where politics is going on well, but policies are failing. good governance will not be achieved. So you need, or from the predecessor, where policies were going on well, but politics were failing, good governance will not be achieved.
Right.
So we need to ensure that we can balance out the two. And we knew right from the campaigns that there was no harmony in the party during the campaigns. The large portion of the party did not want Tinubu to emerge as a flag bearer. There was that tussle and bustle going around. We all knew that for him to have emerged, there was a lot of betrayal and counter betrayal that happened in the party for some people to sustain themselves and remain politically relevant. But even at that, now we've gone past the politics aspect of it. We are 100 days away from the politics because the way
365 days.
yeah, because yes, 1 year. Sorry, we're 1 year away from the politics. And the way politics work is that now 2023 was to celebrate their win. 2024 is the year that they will work. Because 2025 they will work again. 2026 they'll start preparing for 2027. That's where it's going to go. So if for this year now that half of it is already fast spent, we're not beginning to see the ripple effects or any form of benefits to the most common of the commonest person. Because it is one thing that the government is asking us to adjust because it is necessary, and I agree. But it's another thing for them asking us to adjust, and we are seeing them living la vida loca.
Right. Okay. And on that particular issue, Mr. Emmanuel, let's talk about where we're coming from, where we are today, and where we hopefully would love to be the destination that the renewed hope is channeled towards. Looking at what was promised, and looking at how the administration is trying to deliver, do you think there's a handshake there?
Not necessarily. I would say yes and no. Yes, because President Buhari promised, President Tinubu promised student loans, and truth to his word, he's followed through with it. He also promised that he's going to create what do you call it, a credit society.
Credit scheme.
So those are the two major that I remember him promising. The rest I really can't remember. And I think most of the other promises were made within his jugular moods and all that.
Saying that he was going to reduce our purchasing power. Is that what you mean?
we don't want to do that. Well, I mean, I remember him saying that when they asked him what's his plan and all that, I think it was the LCCI.
That's right.
Where he said he was going to hit the ground running.
Well, that's the NSG.
He was NSG. He's going to hit the ground running. And somebody made a joke at me and said, no, that he hit the ground and we were running. But the reality is that, I want to go back to your question, in answering his question. APC came out to, as I hope I get it right. APC says they are the center left. Or is it the PDP that is the center left? And they are, between APC and PDP, one is center left, the other one is center right. I think PDP was the center right, APC center left. APC came out as a welfarist party. So President Buhari exemplified that welfarism, and they took it to a level that's, unknown to any human being on earth. So the 30 trillion or 50 trillion ways and means went into all those welfarism, which you cannot explain. The monumental increase in the fuel subsidy. For the first time in the history of Nigeria, we're paying 6 trillion. And of course, when President Tinubu came on board, he went to the opposite. President Tinubu, is operating a capitalist society, which is more of the PDP with a complete difference. Now, the other day I was here and I told us that what I see the government doing is a government of the elite, for the elite and by the elite. There's no plan for the ordinary people. Let's excuse, can't even talk about the student loan until it begins to implement and we see how it pans out. But the reality is that there is no relationship between what happened last 8 years and what have begun to happen and what will continue to happen, because they both have different philosophy, understanding, and style of operation. You could see the trajectory of President Buhari, Tinubu's, administration. You see where he's going to. You could see clearly. Now, my expectation is that for someone who has this capitalism mentality, that he should have gone back to say, look, how did we get to 6 trillion? How did we get to 6 trillion? My expectation was that he would have probed that 6 trillion. That's the first thing I expected him to have done. And it won't take you a month to do that. You will unravel the mystery behind this subsidy. When you do that and cut it by half, which is what the Labour Party man said he was going to do, even if you cut it by half, or even let's even say cut it by half. When you cut it by half, that brings you to about 3 trillion, right? And you probe further, you might be lucky to even reduce it further. When you remove the subsidy, you won't have the effect you have today. Because what has happened over time is that 6 trillion was paid to some people. And the same people who got that 6 trillion will use that 6 trillion or part of the money to rubbish the system for you. That's why when you talked about when the subsidy was removed, queues came back to town. Today we still have, fuel scarcities on and off. The question is, why? We pay 700, in some places 1,200 per liter. Diesel hovers around 1,300 to 1,500. You barely have scarcity of that because, it was removed a very long time ago. Cost of doing business has gone up like, you can't even explain, you don't even know the numbers anymore. And it's also made worse with the absence of a handshake between the fiscal policies and the monetary policies. What has happened in the last 1 year is that the CBN came on board and continued largely just like the CBN of the last 8 years, trying so hard to help the economy by churning out a lot of monetary policies. But we are yet to see the clear-cut fiscal policies that will create that synergy.
Isn't this one of those situations where it's darkest before dawn? That this is something that we have to go through. There is no back doors to fixing the rot within our system.
If I may, just a second. Yeah. I'm tired of hearing this, what we have to go through. President Buhari came and said he's laying foundations. And we have to go through. President Tinubu is coming now and saying we have to lay foundations. Please, this foundation, where is it going to?
How deep is it? So, let us further advance this. I'm sure we have seen so much in the last 1 year than probably the last 8 years with regards to policy reforms or restart or whatever they choose to call it. Where do you think the problem lies? You said something in your opening remarks that stuck with me, which was the inability of this government to communicate even its own policies. So what we have seen is they give an idea that we are headed in this direction, and that's it. And then you start saying things that contradict that movement, and you are not sure. We have seen this very opaque communication from the people. They behave in a manner that suggests that we don't owe you any explanation. We seem to love this country more than you do. Just trust our judgment and follow in our lead. Is that where the problem is? Because on the face value, we cannot fault some of those policies, can't we?
You cannot fault the policies, but you can fault the implementation.
Yeah.
You can fault the mechanism with which it is being applied. So I don't really have a problem with the policies. I think just to also pick up from where he was speaking of something earlier when he was talking, is that there's some level of Tinubu is doing what he promised. Let's be fair. He said he was going to. Everybody ran on first subsidy removal. All of them ran on floating the naira because we cannot keep subsidizing the naira. If there's any part of the country that any part of the economy that I don't think should be subsidized is the currency. But you cannot then say your currency should find its value when you are not equipping it with anything. You're not selling anything. There are thousands and thousands of Maersk trucks that come into Nigeria and go back empty because we're not shipping anything back. There's no exchange, so FX is not even staying here. So those people don't come here, they don't buy anything, and you're expecting. So we just threw the naira into a knife fight into a bazooka fight without even giving it a pen knife. Defend yourself. We're just saying you should just go there and go and find hand-to-hand combat in a bazooka fight where everybody's coming with tanks and everything. It's not fair.
Yeah.
Now, I think what the government should have done was to find a way to gradually implement these policies effectively, just to ensure that the common man is not abruptly affected. But that was not taken into account. So the Tinubu administration has been a bit of that whole idea of we need to lay foundation, we need to ensure it needs to stop. Like I said, last thing I said was it's one thing to ask us to adjust. It's another thing when you're asking us to adjust, but you're living large. You can't keep doing that. Let's see how much sacrifice are you also giving? You also have to give something.
Okay.
If you're asking other people
in
to
terms
give.
of that, isn't the cutting down of the entourage a sign that they're actually listening to the concerns of the people?
I don't think. Even I was at an hotel some weeks ago. I saw the Federal Ministry of Justice there. Part of the job we're doing was supporting the Federal Ministry of Justice. Well, they said they were trying to look for policies to tie the Orusanya reports to, because they are going forward with the Orusanya. That's the first time a committee has actually come with their report and they are going forward with policy to implement. But I don't think the cost of governance will ever go down. It's always expensive to run government anywhere in the world. I'm not going to actually be naive to think by merging agencies the cost of governance will go down. It won't. Why won't it go down? Because those same people, we're not sacking anybody now. The only thing we're just doing is we are rebranding agencies. We'll just rename agencies. So we'll just say, but
we're streamlining resources, aren't we?
It's still going to be, the cost of governance is going to be, the cost of moving the president from point A to point B for security reasons is going to always be expensive.
So it's not a Tinubu thing then?
It's for cost of governance.
Right.
I'm heading somewhere. Right. For cost of governance, I don't think, this is a personal opinion anyway, I don't think it's a Tinubu thing.
all personal opinions.
Right. Just to put that there.
Right.
Yeah. But for other things, there are so many other things that I feel like we're being outrageous about. There are a lot of other things that we're being outrageous about. So there's a difference between cost of governance and cost of paying government official salaries. The amount of money that the senators are receiving is outrageous. We're collecting more than presidents in even developed countries. We need to review that. The kind of what do they call it? The kind of leeway we give, financial leeway we give to government officials need to come down. I was watching an interview where Michelle Obama was saying that the feeding of the president is funded from the salary of the president.
He pays rent in the White House, I understand.
It's paid from his salary. He cannot be using people's money to feed himself when he's being paid salaries. Because the essence of his salary is so that he can also live within his means. These are very, very important things that we need to put in. We need to actually mirror for a country as poor as ours. Because yes, we are rich, but in the global sphere, we're not very rich. We're quite poor. When you talk about governance, when you talk about our government systems in other places.
It doesn't have to be the global sphere. If you spread that riches in parentheses to our population size, it disappears.
We don't even necessarily need some of these monies to go into to go as cash into people's hands. We need them to go into systems. You promised us CNG buses. We've not even seen CNG. Much less of the buses. So so many other things that needs to be put in place. So if we can ensure, I think that this is one of the things that most government don't understand. One, you cannot solve all the problems in Nigeria in 8 years if you are blessed to have 8 years to run the government. You can't solve all the problems. So for me, if Tinubu administration could solve two things, or let's say three things. One of it is insecurity, which I think is concurrent. We have to find a way around that. Number two is ensure that there is steady power supply in the country, so that I don't have to pay premium price for gas or for fuel to do basic amenities like power my house, or manufacturers should actually have steady power for them to continue. And the last thing is ensure that there's an effective intra and intercity transport network.
Okay.
And if you can do those things, I think we're going to be a little bit fine. Then somebody else can come and continue from there.
So many have said, their piece about the performance so far. I think it's below par. I think even the APC would admit that it has under-delivered.
That's why they are they are celebrating
based on the promises that were made and the expectations of Nigerians, albeit that a lot of people have been advised to manage their expectations, that no magic is going to happen just because President Tinubu is coming on board. But let's also contextualize it. Is our expectation unrealistic, especially from just 1 year in office? Looking at the scale of the problem, that is.
I think, if I want to be fair, I think 1 year is too short.
Of course.
However, the expectations are not, over
unrealistic.
Unrealistic, the expectations are not unrealistic because there are basics that we expected. For example, while you were talking about cost of governance, one of the major challenges I have with the Tinubu government is fiscal indiscipline. The luxurious lifestyle of the executive and the legislators is, I'm trying to find the most appropriate word. I don't want to say what I have in my mind. Is, for lack of a better word, irresponsible.
One of the senators called it people-driven corruption.
Unfortunately, for example, yesterday when the FCT minister was, reeling out, he said something that baffled me. He said, that all residents of Abuja have decided to name. I wasn't consulted.
But he's a minister on your behalf, isn't it?
But you should have
He was
consulted.
not elected now.
Well, you should have consulted.
The president.
Isn't that just political speak anyway?
No, I mean, there are things that's why I talk about fiscal indiscipline. They do things arbitrarily. For example, the president came on board. The first thing he did was that he went on this Toyota Land Cruiser. What is that? Is it Land Cruiser?
Yeah, it was one of the biggest, 160 million.
Yeah, this heavy. Billions of naira went into those purchases for the office of the president, vice president, chief of staff, the wife of the president, and such like. They lavished, in fact, they borrowed. That was the first ways and means he took when he came on board, because he said there was no money, so they had to do ways and means. Immediately after that, the National Assembly brought their own budget. And said,
60 million naira for
so each member of the National Assembly got 160 million to purchase similar vehicles.
But they say it was because the roads were not too comfortable.
Okay, so the roads are uncomfortable. Who is supposed to do the road? But that's a different conversation. Why I cringed when I saw those expenditures was that we have made the Nigerian vehicles or assembled vehicles in Nigeria, not one. They are like, in the last count, like 5. You have Innocent, you have Nord, you have G, whatever.
GC.
There are so many of them, and they do very good vehicles. Most of these vehicles are supposed to be pool vehicles or what have you. These vehicles will go through these roads. And when you do that, you keep the money here. You create jobs. You calibrate the economy. You want to grow the economy. You want to increase, employment and all that. Yet, what are you doing as a president? You're throwing away your employment across the Atlantic. When you go to America, you listen to the presidential debate, you will see that this man says, I'm keeping the jobs at home. This one says, yes, I'm going to keep some of the jobs at home, but I'm going to take some of the job and do X, Y. You see clear-cut ideas on how, you know where this person stands on any issue. But here, our politicians say one thing, and when they turn their back, they forget what they've said. So I think this was where they began to show their lack of discipline for me. Then following after that was the renovation and fresh construction and the villa and the Lagos house, and I kept asking myself, is it that these guys didn't get their scale of preference properly, or they failed economics in their secondary school?
Osemeka, if I listen to you to the end, I'm not sure how I would feel, especially given that we are now beginning to see arguments in favor of changing the president's Eagle One, which they claim had been refurbished with over $5 billion by the previous administration. I mean, a $5 billion innovation or refurbishment is as good as a brand new jet in the face of our knowledge around how long the American Air Force One has been.
I'm hearing this for the first time.
I'm also hearing this for the first time.
What?
Yeah, that's happening. The National Assembly is already having closed-door meetings with the National Security Advisor, because they said He went to Holland and he had a breakdown, and we cannot continue.
The presidential fleet has been experiencing so many challenges.
Yes,
I know. He was over traveling.
Yeah.
Aside from that, the president had to take
my question really is, yes, the vice president also had 2 breakdowns, they told us. By the way, the presidential fleet is the second biggest fleet in Nigeria after Air Peace. You can take that to the market. But my question really is, when we describe the president, what comes to my mind as a Catholic is the word Trinity. The president manifests himself in various forms and through the ministers. I would like us to, do an overview. In what aspects of those is different forms do you think the president has given some sign of positive expectations? I mean, just do an X-ray of the ministry for us. Where do you get a sense that some of his lieutenants understand what needs to be done and they are fit to graduate?
So far, and everybody unanimously agreed to this, that has actually done really well is the Minister of Interior in terms of his revamping of the immigration system. And largely, although this is unconfirmed, it's because he has a personal experience, from what I understand. Somebody was.
We all have a personal experience about immigration.
It's a very sickening system. But so far, I think that's the only person that has actually shown that he understands the job.
You don't think of the works minister as doing anything?
I don't. Who is the one? Is it Umahi Abi?
Yes, he is.
Oh, it's Umahi Abi. Sometimes I forget. That's the point I'm trying to make.
There are about 50 of them.
The point I'm trying to make is that sometimes we forget where these people are because they're not doing their job effectively enough for us to actually remember them. And the security situation in the country is becoming more and more deplorable. One of the most secured neighborhoods in Abuja used to be Maitama. 3 weeks ago, somebody was shot dead in the center of Maitama, in the heart of Maitama. And nobody did anything about it. You go down to the south regions now, cultism that had been on the low is now becoming more pronounced. You go down to deep north, we hear less and less of Boko Haram and more banditry increasing. It looks as if the people from Boko Haram Boko Haram is not paying so much money anymore. Let me go and submit my CV here. Maybe I'll get a job. Then they will move.
Is it a coinage of the media?
Not necessarily. Well, it's one way to put it. It's one way to look at it. But I don't necessarily think there's no smoke without fire. There's no smoke without fire. So I don't think the media uprooted it from anywhere. I think that there's some level of truth to it. And if you look at it, the level of operations between the banditry system and the Boko Haram system is a bit similar. They are not that dissimilar. So we can actually draw some tentative conclusion as to how these things work.
Okay. So we're just going to take a moment to revisit this particular day back in 2023 when some of those premises were actually made public by the president in his inaugural speech. So let's take that nostalgic trip back to May 29, 2023 and give you a sense of a highlight of what the president promised in his inaugural speech. Take a look.
We shall defend the nation from terror and all forms of criminality that threaten the peace and stability of our country. We shall remodel our economy to bring our growth and develop the GDP much better, achieve the GDP much better than we are. I assure you. Look at through job creation, food security, and an end to extreme poverty. And our administration, women and youth will feature prominently. Security shall be top priority of our administration, because neither prosperity nor justice can prevail against insecurity and violence. To effectively tackle this, we shall reform both our security government and the architecture of fuel subsidy. Unfortunately, the fuel subsidy is gone. you all be complaining about multiple taxation. We shall ensure that the export and foreign business repatriate their half and dividend and profits home. On agriculture, rural income that is secured, a commodity exchange board guaranteeing minimum prices for certain products, animal program, a nationwide program for storage and facilities to reduce falling and freezing. All of that we are taking. Agricultural hubs will be created throughout this year to increase production and engage in training, promote training, and build value-added processing through this. Food will be made more abundant. Interest rate need to come down. We shall invest more in our security personnel, and it means more than an increase in number. We shall provide better training, equipment, pay on the economy. We graduate GDP not less than 60%. Industrial policy would to utilize the full range of domestic manufacturing and lessen import dependence. The electricity will become more accessible and affordable to businesses and homes alike. Let us be united. Thank you. God bless Nigeria.
All right. Looking back 365 days.
Yeah, it's clear that we've missed the mark, or at least the administration has missed the mark. He was talking about minimum prices for certain crops. We look at how Nigerians are overpaying now, bending over backwards
I would
to pay
say
for
that he did not mention
food
any
items.
that in 1 year.
He talked about interest rate.
Yeah.
And everything seems to be, I mean, the metrics are looking quite staggering. Power, security, while we've noticed some significant movement in the right direction, is still an ever-present danger. The issue of the subsidy that I think that we've spoken about extensively. But gentlemen, just looking back at that particular inaugural speech, it stands out for all the wrong reasons, especially because of the whole subsidy affair. And I think Nigerians still have not forgotten about that, or have neither forgiven the president for saying it in that fashion. But looking back at all of those statements, how much of it is the administration's making? How much of it is just sheer bad luck because of the timing of everything that's going on in this country?
I will speak to it, in addition to the last question about, like sort of a review of the ministers. One, I think where we are currently in terms of inflation is the making of the administration. Yes. When you make the right policy with wrong implementation plan, you will get the wrong result. It's not enough to come out with good policy, but you must follow that policy with strategic, and clear-cut implementation plan, and you must follow it through. You must have the discipline to follow it through. I worked in the deep fields, in with the UN agencies in the Northeast. There are clear laid down rules, SOPs, standard operating procedures, that if you go outside of those procedures, you get penalized. The reason for those SOPs is so that when you do A, you know that A will take you to B, B will take you to C, C will take you to. So it's like
the chain.
It's like a chain. But when you go outside, it's clearly, even your supervisors know that you've stepped out. So people who think properly, I mean, the president promoted himself as a thinker, as a man who uses, remember when they said he's frail and all that, he said, no, he's not going there to carry sand, that is thinking. Unfortunately, he's not been able to, manifest that, one, in his appointments. That's why I said I was going to switch to in his appointments. Now, taking a look at the 48 ministers, for me, if I were him, the very first thing he needs to do today is to sack 50% of them. The
50%?
50%. The people I believe, because if you want,
most notably, so we don't speak ambiguously.
Most notably, the tourism minister, 1, 2. I would have loved Ebumahi to be sacked because, yes, he's a fantastic engineer, but he has foul mouth. He's not someone who is well coordinated. He does not understand I'm trying to find the appropriate word. He doesn't understand Nigeria. He says things without thinking. Then he walks back on what he has said without any form of apology, for example. I mean, take a look at the coastal road, whatever. I'm yet to find the coastal road in the budget. I've not seen it in the budget. I don't know how they came about, but that's a different discussion for me. The minister for, what do you call it? Tourism. The tourism minister. The youth minister. I think there are 2 there, right? I think there are 2. The Greek minister needs to go. I think he should go back to the party. He was a better party man, but he was a better leader in the party than a Greek. He doesn't understand anything about extension services and all that.
With all his experience in the Senate?
He has no understanding. The shining stars for the administration.
Sorry, before you go there, let's not forget the power minister.
Oh, the prime minister should be number 1, actually. The prime minister should be number 1. Clearly, I don't have any dog in his fight, unfortunately, but he's a terrible politician and he's a terrible administrator.
Exactly.
Unfortunately. He's young, but I didn't expect somebody that young to behave the way he's behaved in the last 1 year.
Youthful exuberance.
He's done all the wrong things at the wrong time.
Talking about SOPs, and given the fact that you work in development, our knowledge of SOPs are usually designed, wholesomely, strategically, around the central goal.
Correct.
And then your KPIs are delineated from those. So you understand what is expected and you go and do it. In this case, I doubt any of them were given.
Oh no! If I may even jump in, actually, they were, because I know fully well that they were. How do I know? Hadiza Bala is heading the coordination unit.
That's right.
Hadiza Bala is heading. I know I have some of my friends who work very closely with her. I know that they went ministry by ministry. They went there. They developed KPIs with the ministers and said these are going to be your targets. I think the mistake, and I also said this to them when I was hanging out in an informal setting. I said, see, these KPIs, I saw some of them anyway. These KPIs that you have developed, you ought to have made it public. Let's all know that these are the KPIs.
Isn't that what they're doing with the Citizen Tracker app? I mean, all of these things were there. The baselines were there.
Documents. Those KPIs were not public documents.
Yeah, but we have the Citizen Tracker app where it sets, it pretty much paints a picture of what the goals are, what the objectives are, and the breakdown of everything.
Many which are vague.
So what they even did was, for each ministry, there was a more ambitious goal. Then those goals were broken down to MDAs, to the agencies. So it's now the responsibility of the ministry to say, give KPIs to your agencies on how they feed into this your particular. But I remember watching a few minutes into, they did their evaluation clinical some days ago. What I was hearing was contrary to what I know I had seen.
Correct. I was going to come there.
To what I know I had seen.
I was going to come there.
There were some political. It was like a campaign.
It was all political.
It was like a campaign, basically. That's what it looked. It looked like they were doing their campaign for office, and they were just saying. So everything was spoken in future terms. Not in I have done this. we are. There is no. It just felt like making promises all over.
If I may jump in, I think one of the people I wanted to list to be sacked is Hadiza Bala. No, she messed up in MPA. She had issues with Amechi and she had to go. And similar. If you look at those KPIs he's talking about, 99% of those KPIs, the ones that you could clearly say, okay, these are proper KPIs, were tailored towards revenue generation.
Yes.
If you see the revenue generation ambition of this administration, you will sack this government.
Interesting.
Why is that? Because they're setting the bar low or too high?
Bros, it's
government,
a private.
You are privatizing government.
It's privatizing the entire nation, and they're going to take it from you.
But I think that there is a consensus that our governments have been very bad with certain business enterprises.
No, government has no business.
Yeah.
What government ought to do is to create enabling environment for private sectors to thrive.
But more than half the economy is still in the hands of the government, whether it's in the power sector, whether it's in transportation.
No,
I
sir,
think
no.
And these are some of those assets that we still run.
No,
the
sir. The private sector holds the edge in Nigeria till tomorrow. But the government is stifling the development and growth of private sector.
Let me bring some clarity to what we just said. Actually, let me make you understand something. When we say they are privatizing the economy, we don't mean that they are creating businesses. You know what they're saying? They are setting targets for ministries like Ministry of Agriculture to generate money for the government. They are setting targets for ministries like Ministry of Justice, for example, from monies that are being paid as fines. Now, when you set a target for a ministry like Ministry of Justice, for example, that means you're telling Ministry of Justice to indiscriminately fine people, including police, generate money.
Circumstances
that will create that. So that we're saying that should not be.
I agree with
Certain
you.
ministries should not be generating money.
I agree
when
with
we
you.
are paying tax.
I agree with you.
And we should not pay direct tax for mundane activities of government. The last time they were asking us to pay cybersecurity tax. Why should I pay tax for cybersecurity when there's an NSA that has a budget, when there's a police, when there's AFCC, there's NFIU, and all of these ministries and agencies have their budget to do the same thing you're asking me to pay money for? Pay a direct tax.
And besides, the law clearly listed who should pay those taxes.
Yes.
And those taxes, and not the citizen.
Interesting.
I mean, they've walked back.
Yeah, way back.
Well, because
they suspended actually.
Yes, for further consultations, I hope they listen to us. I agree. I agree with some of the things you said. Just quickly before we take some of the headlines, a colleague was telling me that in the aviation ministry, what you should have is not revenue generation, but cost recovery. Because you are dealing with safety, you are an enabler in that sector. But when you pursue revenue generation, the agencies will struggle to survive, and generally it becomes impossible for Nigerians to fly. But these conversations we can continue to expand. We will bring you some of the stories that made the headlines of the paper at this hour.
Let's start with the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper. As you can imagine, it's a big day for the government. They're not celebrating, but they're also celebrating. I think this is the heaviest I've seen, the Daily Trust newspaper. But of course, you can't feel it because you're looking at the digital copy of the front page. But the story that is not related to the one-year anniversary celebration is one that captures the mood in Kano and the confusion that continues to emanate from this particular development. Conflicting court orders as Sanusi Bayero cling to Kano airmanship. So it's more than just a battle between the 15th and the 16th Emir of Kano. It's also a battle of supremacy between a federal high court and a state high court about jurisdiction on this particular matter. And it has polarized the viewpoints from Kano and from other observers across the country. So that
interesting developments there, and you can understand why this made it to the front page because of the implication for safety and security, given the volatile nature of the state we are talking about. We take the Punch newspaper next. The Punch newspaper there talks about Tinubu's first anniversary gift. FG plans fresh cash transfer scheme for 75 million Nigerians. We're not sure how this will happen. As different, we talked about a register that we have not been able to clean up to this day. We do not have a minister in that ministry today on account of how badly we managed whatever provisions we had there in the first 6 months of this administration. But let's see how that goes as we progress in this journey. Especially, I'm afraid, because Murkthar told us that governance happens in the second and the third year. I don't know how this progresses.
We're going to hold him to his word. If something doesn't happen next year and the year after that. Let's take a look at The Guardian next. The Guardian newspaper for today, it's quite a celebratory one. Wonder how much they spent on the papers this morning to highlight those 8 priority areas. But of course, if you're interested in reading out, in understanding what the Federal Ministry of Information and National Orientation wants you to understand about the journey so far of the Tinubu administration, take a look at some of the national dailies this morning. But away from the anniversary, opposition loyalists bicker over Tinubu's performance as well as outlook. We're still staying on that one.
If I may actually even chip in with what has been concurrent. At first, when I saw the front page of Daily Trust, that was the first paper I read this morning before coming in. I thought this infographic in the front page was done by Daily Trust, but now I'm seeing that it's an ad because it's concurrent in all the papers.
Exactly.
And when you go through it and you read what is there, it says things like economic reforms for sustained growth, strengthening national security. Again, we cannot, a 1 year into office, keep communicating like we are campaigning for office. I would assume, because I had not read the infographic, I said I was going to save this. I even took a screenshot that just in case I don't see the front page anymore, I have a screenshot, I'll come and read it. I thought this was like achievements of the president in the past 1 year.
I think
but what this looks like, I think
there's a breakdown of some of those deliverables to the best of their ability about how the kidnappings have been minimized,
the first thing I
about how certain things have been delivered.
I manage communications for organizations. The first thing I will see is that infographic. I think what they want, what they should have put there should have been that those particular achievements that are in the inner page, at the back page. But then again, we can't keep looking at the government and we can't keep talking like we are still campaigning to be in office. We are not.
I think that should definitely resonate with the department responsible for this at the Ministry of Information. Maybe the philosophy of communication differs. But also, staying with the front page of the Guardian newspaper, there's a lot more on the development in Kano, and another strike looms as Labour rejects federal government's fresh offer of 60,000 naira as minimum wage offer. So this meeting was the fallout from the meeting that continued on Tuesday, and we've heard the various versions. The TUC president was speaking. He said, listen, he doesn't think the government is serious about these negotiations, but also speaking to the private sector employers. They think they've reached their threshold.
That's right.
Anything above 60K is going to undermine their business model, and the margins will be cut short, and they would have to cut down the number of employees, which will also create yet another problem. So the ongoing debate about the new national movement continues as Labour rejects that 60,000 naira offer, which is an addition of a 3,000. What's with the 3,000 naira addition?
As a
cut from 48. Yeah.
I like to describe it.
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to the Nation newspaper. And on the Nation newspaper this morning, it is about reeling out the ministerial stewardship by Badaru. You'll find that in the inside pages. This is largely more of a promotional page, and I'm sure you understand why.
Nation.
You understand, but right there, yes, it's the nation.
It's for the nation.
The nation Nigeria.
He who pays the piper, they say. Oyetola, we have raised maritime revenue by 92%. That's the minister of the blue economy, if you like.
It is one thing to speak about the revenues that are being generated. It's another thing to tell us what are the revenues doing for the people. So you're generating all of this money. You're telling us you're claiming it and you are proud about it. But then it's not trickling down to everybody else. So where is the revenue going to?
I think it's the concept we now see with even corporate reporting, moving away from just a P&L reporting to now a more what's the word now? I think I remember it. That speaks more about the impact of your operation in the environment rather than your P&L. So it's like a CMD coming to reel out achievement, and it tells you he has grown revenue and while killing people in the process.
If you go down the subnationals, you see clearly some states that have delivered something in 1 year.
Yes.
And I think you know, just so we can wrap up the newspaper headlines, how much of everything that we're talking about that is, you know, wrong with what's happening right now should be placed at the table of the president, and how much of it should be at the subnational level? Because the governors, to a certain degree, are not pulling their weight, because the president alone cannot shoulder the responsibility of fixing everything, isn't it?
Well, you know that all that we've discussed.
No, but isn't that a point that also needs to be stressed out?
Very, very valid point. The reality is that's why people say that Nigeria needs to be restructured, because the federal government has taken on too much for themselves. And you take too much, you earn too much, but you're not delivering, either as a result of your capacity or as a result of
I think we have the infographics showing how state finances have improved greatly since the removal of fuel subsidies.
Yes.
Some that were earning 60 billion, you know, in FAC allocation, have gone as high as 100 and something billion. Shouldn't that be a yardstick to judge the performance?
That's why I mentioned that some states have somehow shown something within a year. That, just like I mentioned before, 1 year might be too short to measure, you know, success, but you could tell, you can tell a performing administration from their first year in office. So take, for example, let's take a case in point, River State. River State is a state that in the last 1 year has been bedeviled with political bickering.
Yeah.
You know, that about 10 commissioners resigned in full swoop. One day, they went for political solution, they came back, the state assembly began to dish orders, you know, instructions to the governor. I mean, I've never heard that before, that's the first time I'm seeing that. But over time, you could see that the governor had something to even point to and say, okay, in my 1 year, even amidst this political turmoil, I was still able to deliver A, B, C. Go to Zamfara. Zamfara, that Nigeria has called the headquarters of kidnapping and banditry. You could see that Governor Dawud Lawal is able to point at a few things that he's been able to do. You go to Abia State, you go to Enugu State. Enugu State has grown the IGR from 38 billion annually to 280 billion annually. So you could point at governors that have done something. I mean, Anambra State is one of the worst states now. The man is just speaking English every day, writing long theses.
You know, and you have not spoken of the most obvious, which is Abia State. But
of course, Abia State. Right?
You see, just to also add to what he has actually said, for Abdullah's question about what should be at the federal and subnational, we need to also remember that something is, one of the ironies of Nigeria, the way Nigeria operates, is that just because something is wrong does not make it illegal. So we need to ensure that we go back to that Bible, which is the Constitution, that we all adhere to. Chapter 2 of the Constitution clearly spells out the functions of the government, yeah? But there is nowhere in Chapter 2 where it clearly says the government will be held responsible for these functions. It is one of the things that we're trying to do in constitutional reform currently, trying to see how we can actually force the government to outline or put something there that just says you are responsible, that clearly states that you're. So I think all of these things are things that we also need to look at as a country. So beyond the rhetoric or beyond the theatrics of what we see and what is said, these people are not politically illiterate. These people that we've elected into office, they know what the Constitution says. They know that if the case goes to court, they know fully well that they are going to win the case. Because just because something is wrong does not make it illegal.
If the case goes to court and there is a judgment, are you going to jail the man for not bringing? What the Constitution envisages is that if you don't perform, after 4 years, they vote you out. That's the penalty.
Before we open up the phone lines for you at home, to add your voice to the conversation here and probably get the opportunity, to direct those bullets at Murkthar and Osemeka, because they do seem to be part of this country more than myself. And
you are part of the country.
You can make that judgment. We don't need the feedback. But the risks of deviating, you've talked about going back to the Constitution. Of returning to the old national anthem would help.
That's a mistake. That's a complete misplacement of priority by the National Assembly.
So we're gonna just take a moment. We're just gonna take we're gonna take a moment, right? We're gonna just take a moment. We'll be back in just a moment. There's a lot to double down on. Also, we're gonna open the phone lines in a moment or two. But stick around. Our special coverage continues in just a moment. Sometimes I wish the viewers can get a glimpse of the behind the scenes when we're on breaks, because the conversations doubly excited. But welcome back to our coverage of the first year in office of the Tinubu administration, as we x-ray the impact, the implications of the rollout of the renewed hope agenda by the Tinubu administration, which is marking its first year in office today, being May 29, 2024. Don't forget also, later in the day, Nigeria's 25 years of uninterrupted democracy is also going to be part of our lineup as we look back at the journey so far from 1999 to date. 25 years down the line. I guess we can find a way to also chip that in to our conversation this morning. Plus, we'll be opening the phone lines in a moment or two. Just to give you a heads up, we'll expect that you are going to weigh in and give us your thoughts, your 2 cents on the performance of the Tinubu administration. If you want to also chime in on, say for instance, the performance of your governor in your state to localize the conversation, you're free to also do so, because some of those governors are also marking their first year in office, while others are marking their 5th year in office, as the case may be, across some states of the Federation. Murkthar and Emmanuel have been helping us navigate some of those issues, providing analysis, insights, as well as context to some of these issues that have become pertinent to the growth and development of Nigerians. There's just so much to talk about that you get a sense that even 5-6 hours is not enough, because these problems have been with us for quite some time now. The president recently, while trying to, in his own way, capture where we are right now as a nation, said, listen, the bleeding has stopped. Now we are on a path towards healing. You're smiling. I can almost presume what you're going to say next. But is that a fair analysis of it, especially if we could just digress away from the economy and the social situation to just focus on one key issue that he pointed out in his inaugural speech, which is terror. Security, for instance. I saw data last night about how in the past 1 year, some 4,500 people have died, 7,000 were, kidnapped. Give us a sense. I mean, those numbers are quite staggering. However, we've seen some level of improvement in terms of addressing the gaps within the security architecture. What are your thoughts about how he, as a commander-in-chief, is handling a major challenge in this country, which is insecurity?
Well, I have a different view, honestly. I think it's not that there has been, a departure, a significant departure from what was in terms of the insecurities we've, experienced during President Buhari's administration. I think what has happened is that there's a parable in my village that says that something bigger than the cricket has entered the cricket hole.
Right.
The Nigerians are now faced with a different type of survival challenge, the economic issue. So that has, taken the front burner. If you go, every media house is talking about the economy as against what was in the past, where we more or less, yes, we had economic issues, but somehow we were able to find our way. Then, of course, the issues of the kidnapping and the banditry and all that. The banditry issue and the kidnapping issues, well, I can say yes, to a very large extent. There's been some level of collaboration between the states and the federal government, and that is one major, plank that we never had in the last 8 years, because it was assumed, if you take a cue from what the former Benue State governor was talking about, where the president told him to accommodate his brothers, where people are killing people and you say accommodate them to continue to kill. I mean, that was the sense a lot of us got at the time. So I think there's a departure from that one. But in terms of the security agencies, improvement in the welfare of the security agencies, improve ammunitions and all that, I don't think we've really done significantly well in that area, because just like Murkthar mentioned, you have this evolution between the Boko Haram activities now, metamorphosing into kidnapping and banditry activities, and they are quite similar to one another, because they've seen that when you kidnap, you make more money and faster, as against killing, kidnapping people and you don't get anything. And that happens because also we clearly know that Boko Haram insurgents had this international support at the time where they were getting a lot of money from. Maybe those supports are no longer there, that as it used to be. So I would say that one of the things I feel that President Tinubu didn't really do well, which I believe he could have probably done better, is the appointment of the ministers appointed for defense and the state. I believe you have the wrong square in there. I don't think Badaru and Matawali are the right
pegs?
No, I don't think they're square pegs in square hole. I don't think so, in my view. I think if you must have a politician in defense, you must have at least a retired military person to support that.
All right, let me just inform viewers that we may have to let Murkthar go, because we understand that his attention is needed in different places. So we don't want to be like Nigeria. We don't want trust to happen to Murkthar. But before you go, one man whose appointment elicited some kind of excitement when his name was announced was the health minister, or the coordinating minister of health, party, given his sterling performance at the global level. What would you say about Partey's 1 year?
You see that I'll still go back to the same thing about consumer behavior. Cardoso had a very good, stellar record as an economic and financial person, and when he was announced as a CBN governor, everybody was like, yes, this is a square peg in a square hole. But it is one thing to understand these policies and how they work. It's another thing for you to learn, make deliberate efforts to understand the people you are rolling out the policies for. There are only two people in this country that have ever understood Nigerian consumer behavior properly in that CBN. In fact, one person more than the other, and those are Lamido Sanusi and Soludo and Charles Soludo. These people understood to some extent, Nigerian consumer behavior. They understood Nigerian, because during their time, they understood, to some extent they knew what they were doing. They understood what they were doing. Of course, there were some discrepancies in how some of the things that they did, but their successes were more than their failures. I think that's one of the ways I can put it. Yes, we can still debate that the times that these guys were in office, the global inflation and the global economic turmoil that we are all going through was not there at the time. But still, when you listen to these people talk and some of the policies that they roll out during their time, you could have a sense that they understood the way Nigeria work or the way Nigerians think. But you see the current set of people that are there, you come out from wherever it is you're coming from with these stellar performances with a different set of people who probably are not politically or economically illiterate. They understand the way the market forces work, and then you were rolling out policy and they were succeeding. But you are facing a lot of people who do not even know what economics mean. They don't even know Lord Leonard Robinson's definition of economics. They don't know the difference between wants and needs. All they know that is they need food, clothes on their back, and they need a house, a roof over their head. And you're coming to roll policies that you rolled for Europeans or for Northern Africans, not African citizens, and you're expecting that it's going to work in sub-Saharan Africa. So I think if the government or the ministers want to get it right, one of the first things that they should invest in is in data mining for them to understand the patterns of Nigerian consumer behavior so they can actually do better.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people who would say that, there's no textbook definition or solution that can address what we're facing with in Nigeria. While some of these things can work seamlessly in other countries, in Nigeria apparently we need something a lot
Nigeria
more
is special,
a lot more homegrown.
Yeah.
But gentlemen, we're going to have to take a quick break. Murkthar, thank you so much for the exciting and dramatic analysis. We hope people don't take you up on that whole analysis about things getting better in 2 years.
I didn't say things were going to get better.
Okay.
I said that's how government works.
Okay.
That's how government. You see now.
Okay. Don't hold him to his words.
I did not say it. There were no words.
All right.